Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have the pleasure of reviewing the brand new Cold War premium tank, the AMX 13 SS-11 TCA. This is a French Era 2 light tank for the Western Alliance in the Cold War game mode, and it is an incredibly sneaky, relatively mobile tank with a fantastic auto-loading 75mm gun and a fantastic auto-loading ATGM launcher capable of dealing devastating alpha damage, and these are the best ATGMs in Era 2 of the Cold War game mode in terms of light tanks anyway. So this is the first French tank to be introduced into the Cold War game mode, so it's very exciting. I'm going to be telling you the price, going over the statistics of the AMX 13 SS-11 TCA. I'm going to be comparing it over here on this spreadsheet to the Arctic Hiss and the Object 934, two premium Era 2 light tanks, as well as the BMP2 and the M551 Sheridan, which are two competing Tech Tree Era 2 light tanks. But first we'll have a look at the price, we'll have a look at the statistics in the comparison, then I'll tell you my commander and equipment setup, and then we'll get stuck into two gameplays where I'll show you how this tank performs. So unfortunately the price is one of the downsides of the AMX 13. It has less savings from the get-go as recent Cold War premium tanks have had. So available from the get-go, which is yesterday, May the 31st, the primed and the fully loaded bundles are live. In terms of the primed bundle, which is 16,500 gold, which is an insane price for an Era 2 premium tank. It's 25% savings when you include the equipment and the premium time and all of the boosters and that stuff, and it's a 20% savings on the fully loaded bundle, which is 14,500 gold, which is still an insane price. If you want to get this tank, I highly recommend waiting to get this tank on its own with the base bundle. However, if you were to get the loaded bundle, you do get some boosters and 3 days of premium. That's 14,000 gold, and that's a 10% savings available on June the 7th, which is next week. And if you want to get the tank on its own, which I highly recommend, you have to wait till June the 14th, so not next week, the week after, and that's still an expensive price of 12,900 gold, so you're going to want to think whether that price is worth it for you. And I can tell you now, it's an incredibly powerful tank and an incredibly fun tank, but I'm sure there are going to be lots of premium tanks coming up throughout the year, as well as other French Tech Tree, or the first introduction of French Tech Tree tanks into the Cold War game mode. So let's have a look at this Excel spreadsheet now and compare the AMX 13 SS-11 TCA to the Arctic Hiss and the Object 934. Bear in mind that the AMX 13 and the Arctic Hiss can both use the multiple weapon system, whereas the Object 934 can't. However, they both have a primary gun and also an ATGM launcher. So straight off the bat, we'll have a look at the bonuses, as they are premium tanks. And if you haven't seen my reviews before, I'll just tell you now the color coding. So the green colors on this spreadsheet are the best in class, the red are the worst, and orange is somewhere in between. So as you can see here, the AMX 13 has the best XP and Commander XP bonus at 15%, but the worst silver bonus at 55%, whereas the Arctic Hiss has 65% silver bonus. But you still make a lot of money in the AMX 13, and it depends on your playstyle. If you play better in the AMX 13, you get more damage and more XP, you're going to be making more silver, so that 10% doesn't matter too much. But from the base statistics, the Arctic Hiss comes out on top at 65% silver bonus. And then we get onto the hit points. Unfortunately, the AMX 13 has the joint worst at 2,300 hit points, where the Arctic Hiss comes out on top at 2,400, and it has the worst view range out of the comparisons here at 540 meters, but that doesn't matter too much. This is an incredibly sneaky tank, and you can get up close and personal, use your concealment and spot the tanks that way and negate that view range. It's only 10 meters less than the Arctic Hiss, which has the best in this comparison at 550 meters. So now we get on to the mobility, and that's a bit of a letdown in terms of the AMX 13. It's one of the massive drawbacks to this tank, and something that you're going to want to invest your equipment into, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. But the raw statistics of the AMX 13 in its mobility is 350 horsepower engine, a 22.81 power to weight ratio, a forward speed of 65.2 kilometers an hour, a reverse speed of 25 kilometers an hour, and hold traverse and turret traverse are 40 degrees a second. And you can see here that the engine power to weight and forward speed is the worst of this comparison. The Arctic Hiss comes out on top here with mostly green stats apart from the hold traverse, and the Object 934 has somewhere in between a couple of worse statistics but best in class hold traverse. So I highly recommend in the garage selecting the mobility equipment to improve your mobility in the AMX 13. I have done, and this yellow box here shows the statistics once you have included my commander and equipment setup, but we'll get to that at the end of this comparison. So you can see here the Arctic Hiss, best mobility, AMX 13 has okay traverse but pretty poor power to weight, forward speed and reverse speed, and the Object 934 is kind of somewhere in between. So now we get on to the fun part of this comparison, and that is the guns. So the AMX 13 has a 75mm 6-shot autoloader capable of dealing 1080 damage per clip. The Arctic Hiss has a 90mm main cannon, and the Object 934 has a 100mm main cannon. So with the AMX 13, your standard and premium rounds are APCR, and your third round is HE. Your penetration is extremely low at 212 on standard, 231 on your premium, and 85mm on your HE. And your alpha damage is low with that 75mm caliber, not being very big for an Era 2 tank. It's 180 alpha damage for your standard and premium rounds and 290 on those HE rounds. As you can see here, that is mostly red. However, you do have one little bit here, which is your premium round shell velocity, which is best in class at 1125 meters a second, meaning that you don't have to give an awful lot of lead, and that is best in class. But in terms of standard shell velocity, the best in class goes to the Object 934 at 1430 meters a second on its APF SDS rounds, and the Arctic Hiss is somewhere in between on its standard APF SDS rounds. In terms of HE, the penetration is the lowest compared to the Arctic Hiss's HESH rounds at 180mm, and it also is worse in the alpha damage on those HE rounds, with 30 less alpha damage compared to the Arctic Hiss's 320 alpha damage on its HESH rounds. But now we get to one of the massive wins and the massive plus points of the AMX 13, and that's in its penetration and alpha damage on its ATGM. So this AMX 13 SS-11 TCA has poor shell velocity on its ATGMs at 116 meters a second, meaning it's god awful at leading at mid to long ranges. However, if you get up close and personal, that won't matter too much, and you have the concealment to do so. But the fantastic thing is it has best in class penetration and alpha damage on any Era 2 light tank. You have 660mm of penetration for 1210 alpha damage, and bear in mind this is a 4-shot autoloader with a 15-second intra-clip reload, so you can do an awful lot of damage very quickly whilst also switching with the multiple weapon system between the 75mm and the ATGM autoloader. This penetration is the best in this comparison, and the damage is the best in this comparison by 110 compared to the Arctic Hiss's 480mm of penetration and 1100 alpha damage. This is absolutely fantastic and a massive selling point of this tank. That 660mm of penetration on the ATGM should be able to go through pretty much even the thickest armor in Era 2, as long as you're not shooting at spaced armor or the composite or ERA armor on the front of turrets of super heavies. Shoot the sides of the turret, rear, and you should be golden and go through. And yeah, with these ATGMs, I've ammo-racked quite a few tanks in my first play session already, and it's an extremely fun thing to use when you roll high and you go over that 1210 alpha damage. So now we're going to have a look at the gun handling of the AMX 13 compared to the Arctic Hiss and the Object 934. You can see here that it has the best aim time at 2 seconds, an accuracy of 0.32, which is somewhere in the middle with the Object 934 coming out on top. The DPM on its 75mm is somewhere in between. It's not the worst, which is the Hiss's 90mm, but the Object 934 just pips it with its 100mm. However, the DPM on the ATGM launcher is the best in this comparison at 3,496.9. That is much better than the Object 934's ATGM DPM of 2,610 and even 300 better than the Arctic Hiss's 3102. And bear in mind that these two tanks can use the multiple weapon system, so you kind of can add these two numbers together and you're looking at an effective DPM of like 7,000 DPM roughly, which is absolutely insane until you run out of the ATGMs, of course. If we have a look at the ATGM reload and the reload for the 6-shot autoloader, then the 6-shot autoloader reloads in 9.5 seconds for that 1080 alpha damage, which is really quick, and you can get that down with your commander and equipment setup. And your ATGM 4-shot autoloader reloads in 38 seconds, which is pretty good. And it's it's hard to compare because they are different caliber of guns in this comparison, so we'll just talk about the AMX 13. However, in terms of the ammo capacity, you can carry 60 rounds of standard and premium or HE rounds, and you can carry 8 ATGMs, which means that you can have 2 full magazines in the autoloader on the AMX 13, so you can do an awful lot of damage if you make them count. In terms of gun depression and elevation, the gun depression is 6 degrees, which is 1 better than the Object 934's 5 degrees, but 2 less than the Arctic Hiss's 8 degrees, which is the best in class. And the gun elevation is the worst in class on the AMX 13, which is it's 17 degrees less than the Arctic Hiss's 30 degrees of gun elevation, and 2 worse than the Object 934's 15 degrees of gun elevation. That's a very typical French light tank kind of thing, the 13 degrees of gun elevation, meaning that sometimes you're going to have to use the environment to wedge your tank up. So now we're going to have a quick look at the AMX 13 SS-11 compared to the BMP2 and the M551 Sheridan. Bear in mind that the AMX 13 and the BMP2 can use the multiple weapon system, whereas the Sheridan cannot. As this is a premium tank, it is expected to have less hit points, and it does have 100, or just 50 I should say, less hit points than the BMP2 and the Sheridan, but it does have the best view range out of this comparison at 540 meters. As you can see here, the whole block of mobility is covered in orange and red, meaning that it is worse, whereas the BMP2 is all green pretty much, and the Sheridan beats it in almost every regard, apart from the reverse speed, which is god-awful on the Sheridan at 18 kilometers, I should say, and the reverse speed on the AMX 13 is 25 kilometers. But yeah, mobility the worst on the AMX 13, best on the BMP2. In terms of the gun then, you can see here that the shell velocity is the worst on the AMX 13 and best on the BMP2. In terms of its ATGMs, it's got the worst shell velocity out of all of these tanks here in this comparison, but it does have the best penetration and the best alpha damage, even beating the Sheridan's 1100 alpha damage and the BMP2 620 millimeters of penetration on its ATGM. So yeah, absolutely devastating ATGMs in an autoloader, and you can deal a lot of damage with that. Now we're going to have a look at the gun handling of these tanks in this comparison. The best in class in terms of its aim time is the BMP2, which is 0.1 better than the AMX 13. However, the AMX 13 has the best accuracy. It has the worst DPM on its primary cannon. However, the BMP2 does have a 13mm gun with terrible penetration, 15 alpha damage, and you'll be lucky to even penetrate half of your 30mm autocannon. So I'd say the AMX 13 is kind of just a little bit worse than the Sheridan in terms of DPM, but then the Sheridan is hard to judge because that has HE and heat rounds, meaning that yeah, you're going to have to judge whether you're going to be penetrating with that as well. So the DPM is pretty good on the 75mm, but the DPM on the ATGM launcher is best in class at 3,496, which is much better than the BMP2's ATGM DPM of 1,980, and even 196 DPM better than the ATGMs on the Sheridan. In terms of the ammo capacity then, it's hard to tell again in comparison. The BMP2 has a 30mm autocannon capable of carrying 600 rounds, but they are only 15 alpha damage per shot, whereas the ammo capacity on the AMX 13 is 60 APCR or HE rounds plus 2 full magazines, which are 4 shots per magazine, so 8 ATGMs. In terms of gun depression in this comparison, Sheridan comes out on top with 10 degrees, the gun depression on the AMX 13 is 6 degrees, one better than the BMP2. However, the BMP2 does blow these tanks out of the water in terms of gun elevation at 74 degrees, which can come in handy when you're on maps like Westfield, that kind of thing, shooting up when you're going downhill. However, it's not awful at 13 degrees, and you can make it work if you use the environment to your advantage with the AMX 13. So that's a comparison between these tanks, and I hope that was useful for you, showing you the sort of pros and cons of the tank. Basically, the AMX 13 has the poorest mobility, but it has the best ATGMs. It has very, very good stealth compared to the Object 934, the Sheridan, and the BMP2. It's even slightly better than the BMP2 and much better than the Arctic Hiss. It's a very good concealment value, which I'll tell you about in just a second when we talk through my commander and equipment setup. So let's get stuck into the commander and equipment setup, and I'll show you how it has changed with these yellow blocks here. So in terms of my equipment, I run advanced concealment, traction system, and advanced powertrain. And in terms of my commander, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot, and Green Thumb. So on the equipment, I've chosen to go for concealment and mobility. Mobility just to improve that pretty mediocre mobility. So now I have a power to weight ratio of 23.95. I can go 75.3 kilometers an hour forwards, 28.8 kilometers an hour backwards, and my traverses have improved on the hull to 44 degrees a second, and on the turret to 41.72 degrees a second. And with the commander skills, I have improved my gun handling. I now have an aim time of 1.92, an accuracy of 0.27, a DPM on my 75mm autoloader of 3560, an ATGM DPM of 3739. I can reload my whole 6-shot 75mm magazine in 8.2 seconds, and my 4 shots of ATGMs in 32.79 seconds. This has really worked for me from the get-go. I've had a lot of fun, made a lot of silver. It's a very powerful tank, and I highly recommend it if you can afford it. But we're going to get stuck into the gameplays. Just before we do that, I will tell you my still concealment value with my commander and equipment setup. It's 149 meters, which is about 2 less than or 2 meters better than the BMP2, with the commander and equipment setup being the same on both tanks. So this is a very sneaky, stealthy tank. Sit in bushes. It's a very low profile, and use that to your advantage. But yeah, let's get stuck into the 2 gameplays, and I'll talk you through my thought process playing this tank. Righty ho then, we are into the first gameplay of today's review, and what better map to start off with than Westfield, a open map with lots of foliage, bushes, lots of open areas for me to use the fantastic concealment of the AMX 13, spot for my team, and yeah, be sneaky, get up behind the heavy tanks, or already tank basically, and use this devastating auto-loading 75mm and the devastating ATGM launcher with its 4-shot magazine. So we're going to come up here to the centre of Westfield and spot out towards the south at the start of this battle. We're going to reverse into a bush. We've got low enough profile to try and stay hidden, and when I fire, I'm going to try and make sure that I'm making sure that I'm getting some foliage in between me and the tank. Unfortunately, we fired when he was in the gap there, but we start off this game with an ammo rack on that M60A2 for 2,550 damage, which, yeah, not a bad start, is it? And we've got re-stealth, come up back to this foliage here in between these bushes, and we're just going to fire our second ATGM off at this T72A, dealing over 1,100 damage, and we're already up to 3.7k damage at the start of this battle with 636 assistance. So this is the kind of gameplay that you're going to be doing, spotting for your team, getting some early damage off with your ATGMs, re-stealthing, going back into a slightly different position, trying not to make your movements predictable, and yeah, just absolutely wrecking the team. So there are a few tanks down at the start of this battle, and we've had a pretty good helping hand in that, alongside the other light tanks that are playing aggressively as well. bear in mind that you are slower than a lot of the, well, pretty much every light tank that you're going to come up against in Era 2, and even going to be slower than some of the heavy tanks. And yeah, you're a very light tank, so you don't want to get rammed. You want to be very careful with your positioning. If you're going to get into a bush on a map like Westfield and you're facing upwards, make sure you're reversed so your hull is facing downwards so you can get an easy escape. As you can see here, the power to weight, even with the traction system and advanced powertrain, is pretty poor. I'm going up this hill very slowly, and yeah, you're going to want to bear that in mind when you're trying to make your escape. You can get into trouble very easily with this tank, with any light tank in Cold War, and 2,300 hit points won't go too far, but we're going to try and use our last 2 ATGMs remaining in this 4-shot autoloader, and we're going to see then if we can yeah, reload that and get forward a bit more, try and get some more spot in, get to the side of the enemies. We switched there using the weapon system to our 75mm, trying to get some shots at that enemy AMX 13, but we did miss. The shell velocity, although it is not too bad on the standard and the premium rounds at over 1,000 meters a second, it isn't as good as a lot of tanks in Cold War that have like 1,400, 1,500 plus meters a second. So you're going to want to practice your leading if you're not too good at leading targets, or you've been playing another tank for a while. You might want to increase your lead just to make sure that you hit your shells. But now that we've got re-stealthed and there's an enemy heavy tank there that is not spotted, but we know where he is, we can see the outline of his tank, and we deal another devastating blow with these ATGMs. These really do pack a punch. You absolutely smash the living hell out of the enemy, and with that penetration, I've rarely not penned unless I'm firing at something like an FE-4-11, which is the absolute bane of the existence in Era 2 of Cold War. But here we're going to go for a shot on this T-72AV. Unfortunately, we lost track of him when we were mid-flight. We tried to quickly clutch shot into the side of him, but never mind. We're just going to have to switch to our 75mm and see if we can make it work. And at this distance, we're going to be very lucky to penetrate. We get one shot in, and although it's very low damage, it does mean that you're helping your team just that little bit. You can keep things tracked that kind of way, and it's very good when there are a lot of leopards like there are on the matchmaker at the moment. We're just keeping an eye using the third-person camera here at the enemy AMX 13. He's going to have the same ATGMs we do, and if he hasn't used them already, we could be in for a nasty shock. So I'm going to try and keep my eye on this enemy light tank that is coming around here, and yeah, hopefully we have the chance to take him out. And if not, I'm trying to make my team aware of his presence. But there's this enemy, I think it's an armadillo to the left of me here. We're going to go and join him, just step down, try and bait the enemy light tank into the open here so I have some assistance. And you can see here the concealment allows you to sort of flank tanks very, very easily. We're going to try and finish off this AMX 13 on the enemy team. He's trying to run away, but he got set on fire. He ran into this building, which isn't destructible, and it's killed me numerous times. However, now is my time to take advantage of it, and we get a couple shells in with the 75mm, and it doesn't really matter if you miss with this thing because you're reloaded so quickly. We now come up against a Leopard 1A1. He has 1,273 hit points, and yeah, we roll high enough to take him out, and that's the absolute power of these ATGMs. We're just floating about helping our teammates where we see that they need help. We've spotted at the start of the game, and at the end of the game you can use your mobility that you have enhanced with the commander and equipment setup if you use the same setup that I do, and yeah, enhance it so you can get around at the end of the battle and try and get there. But unfortunately this is just proving too much of a steep hill to get there in time, and unfortunately the T-72 is taken down, but we still had a cracking game nonetheless, and it shows you the absolutely fantastic firepower of the CCA, the AMX 13 TCA, or whatever you want to call it. That's a first class. We finished second in the team with 1,343 base experience points. We get 2 kills, 7.1k direct damage, and 2.3k assistance, with a profit with no boosters on of 274,000 silver. So let's head on now into the second and final replay of today's video. So this is the second and final replay of today's review. We are here on Redshire, which is another fantastic map for a light tank. It allows me lots of opportunity to crest these ridge lines, get my ATGMs in, finish off targets that are on pretty substantial hit points, and that's one of the best things about the AMX 13 SS-11 TCA, is that with that fantastic alpha damage and penetration on your ATGMs, you have the opportunity to finish off targets that you wouldn't otherwise be able to finish off. You can go in, and even if you get yourself in trouble and you come across a target that has, you know, just over 1000 alpha damage or hit points left, I should say, you've still got a fantastic opportunity to take them out. Yeah, and it's an absolute blast to play. I mean, it sort of suits my play style. I enjoy playing light tanks a lot. I like scouting for my team. I think that it allows you to have great influence at the start and the end of the battles, in particular with your vision and your mobility, and I really like sneaky light tanks, getting into bushes, keeping the enemy guessing, going around, finishing them off, and it's a fantastic, really fun way to make silver. So here on Redshire, we've come to these middle hills. We're just trying to spot for our team at the start of the battle. We've got 980 assistants already. This is a little bit slow to get going, but when it does, it's a pretty damn good game. We're in a game here. I think Goliath Games is in this game. He was on stream, I believe, at this point, and fortunately this is this is actually the first time that I've appeared in a streamer's game when they were streaming and actually had a good game. So I don't know whether that's the tank or whether I just got lucky, but I'm gonna say it's the tank. So I accidentally was firing my 75mm gun there. However, with that multiple weapon system, it just means that we can switch. I hold down the A button, switch to the ATGMs, get a lovely ATGM there on the move into that MOBAT, and he gets finished off. And the flexibility of having this multiple weapon system, as well as this concealment, it just means that you are absolutely devastating. It's like the BMP2 when that was given the multiple weapon system. It just gives these light tanks another dimension, and means that they have this flexibility and this fantastic ability to deal an incredible amount of damage. So we're up to 1.1k direct damage and 1000 assistance. We fired 2 ATGMs so far, a couple of rounds off the 75mm gun. And it just gives you that flexibility to fire at lightly armoured targets once you've put an ATGM in, or it allows you to fire the ATGM from concealment, and that's the kind of playstyle that I choose. Spot early doors, try and get an ATGM off, maybe, you know, chop down some of these hit points of the heavy tanks, and then the more that enemy tanks get whittled down, the more I can advance, use the bushes to advance and play that way. So we're going to come up now and try and shotgun this Scorpion with our ATGM. We managed to do that, do a little bit of ramming damage as well. He gets taken out by the T-72AV, and that's another enemy light tank dealt with, and it's just this ambush predatory kind of gameplay. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, you have to bear in mind whether you feel like it's worth it with the price. But again, we roll high enough to finish a tank that's on above 1200 hit points there in the Leopard 1A3, and the penetration was more than enough to go through. It was either the front of the turret or the front of the upper hull there, and we can switch to our 75mm while we are reloading. And the backs of Leopard 1A1 absolutely fine to penetrate with this penetration. I think that it's quite well balanced. The multiple weapon system is very strong. However, the poor penetration on the standard rounds of this tank, and even the premium rounds on the 75mm, the low alpha damage, and you know, the ability to carry the ATGMs is great, but you only have 8 of them. You can make it miss. That shell velocity is really, really slow on the ATGM, so you do have to bear that in mind. They work much better sort of short to mid range, but you can make them work at long ranges as well. Unfortunately, we missed there on that Leopard 1. That would have been a juicy penetration. So I've only got 3 ATGMs left. I want to try and make them count, because this is looking like it's going to be a close game. You don't want to get to a stage where you've only got your 75mm gun left, and you have to rely on that to sort of take you through, because it's very hard to do that, even if it had good penetration, let alone the poor penetration that it has. So unfortunately, that I say unfortunately for that MOBA, he gets ammo racked by our teammates. We lose an ATGM because we were firing whilst someone else was. However, it's still good to get another tank off the board, and it was kind of funny to see as well. So we're just running along these mid-ridges, trying to get re-stealthed and pop up where we can, use the extent of our pretty poor gun depression here, and we're going to see if we can get a shell right into the side of the turret of the FV4-11. Unfortunately, that's one of the rare instances where you don't pan, just showing you how stupid broken that FV4-11 is. Lots of that sort of spaced armour, composite armour all around the turret and the side skirts. Your best bet of penetrating an FV4-11 with this tank is just to go straight behind it, and you can do that with the mobility of this tank. So there's this Leopard 1A1 here. I don't know if he spotted me, but we're going to fire, get a shot into him when he's on that ridge line, aim for the sort of front tracks, he keeps him in place, and the WZ-122, which is ATGMs, takes him out. So now we are just down to our 75mm, and you're going to see what we can do. As you can see here, I run the smoke consumable, meaning that I'm able to get out of situations like this, where I had a tank that has pretty nasty ATGMs looking at me, and yeah, it also improves your concealment for the duration of the battle as well. So this is a very close game, and I'm into one of those situations where I said you probably should try to avoid where you're only using your 75mm gun. So I'm going to have to use my sneakiness, my mobility to try and flank the enemies and just finish off enemies that I feel that I can put clips into, like this Leopard 1. And I'm going to have to do this. You get spotted. However, I'm taking a risk to take up this Leopard 1, and I'm going to rinse and repeat and try and get re-stealthed and come in after another target. I'm switching to the premium rounds because although they only have a 20 or so millimeters more penetration, I'm going to need all the help I can, especially if I'm going to have to try and take out this FV4-11 on the enemy team. So we've already had a fantastic game, but I want to make it even better. That FV4-11 on the enemy team gets taken out, which is absolutely fantastic news for us. That's one of the worst tanks to try and take out with a tank that has poor penetration, and now you're going to be able to see the mobility that's been enhanced. It's still not as good as you'd like it, but of course it is a balancing factor because you have these fantastic ATGMs and the multiple weapon system and the insane sort of firepower, or the raw firepower with this tank. So we're going to go across the open here. I've still got 1,243 hit points, and I'm just going to float around, use my mobility, use the concealment, and just try and take out tanks when I spot them, and work with my team, try not to go too far ahead of them and get myself killed. We come up behind that enemy AMX 13, take him out, and then we reload our clip. And that's one thing that I want to mention in terms of the 75mm autoloader, because it has such a quick reload. It's worth just reloading when you're on the move. Don't leave it with 4 free shells in, something like that. Just reload the whole magazine so that when you get into an engagement you are fully reloaded and you are able to deal that 1,000 or so alpha damage per clip. So we've gone to the south of this map where we knew that these tanks were. We're going to go to the bottom of this sort of ridge line, get under their gun line and try and spot these tanks out for my team, and hopefully our team will oblige us. So there's this T-72 AV. I'm trying to bait him out into the open. I was kind of hoping that he would come out into the open when I had a bit more momentum behind me. However, we do get a couple shots in here. We damage his tracks and a Mobat takes him out, and we kind of baited him into stupidity with this tank. And now we're going to go forth and try and take out the last 2 tanks. I've noted that they're in a platoon, so there's a good chance that they're working together, so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be on this 9-0 line, which is the typical kind of brawling location, but they're obviously trying to hide from us. I'm just going to crest these ridge lines, use my concealment, see if I can spot them without getting spotted myself, and then we're going to go in for the kill. But it turns out they are actually in the south. Must have missed them completely. They were just behind that T-72 AV, which we helped take out just a minute ago. We have good enough mobility now. We're going to go in from the opposite flank that medium tank's going in from, and we're going to try and wait until he's close enough to come and help us, but he is rushing in a little bit too eager against that Leopard 1A3. However, that Leopard 1A3 is looking the opposite way, giving me the perfect opportunity to use this 75mm gun right behind this Leopard and take him out. Some gun depression issues there. Unfortunately, we missed that shell. Unfortunately, we also missed a shell in the move, and we missed the final shell, which could have been disastrous if we didn't have a few extra teammates on our team. And now I'm going to juke this tank. Look like I'm going around to the left of this building. stop, get re-stealth, come round to the right, and wait for that perfect shot on the move there into the back of that Leopard 1A3 and take that one down with the team. So that's a victory in the AMX 13 with 4 kills, 6.5 direct damage, 4.4k assistance, 300,000 silver, mastery badge, and that's without any boosters. And yeah, another fantastic game in this tank, showing you the power of the AMX 13 SS-11 TCA and its fantastic multiple weapon system, best in class ATGMs, and great stealth and pretty reasonable mobility once you have improved it with the mobility equipment. But I hope you've enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments if you have. You're going to have to think long and hard whether this is worth it for the price, but it still is fun nonetheless. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.